it really, a lot of it depends on what the global economy is doing. And a lot of it rides, as you said earlier, on where the US-China negotiations on trade come out. Also where the EU negotiations on trade come out. Let's not forget there are pretty hefty tariffs on cars that Trump has threatened the Europeans with. So it's that, but the OPEC cut really did the trick, because they said in December they would take out 1.2 million barrels a day. Now, that was OPEC was doing 800,000, and non-OPEC, the OPEC Plus, their friends, led by Russia, were going to do 400,000.
Right, but Cornelia, the big story is really the US-China trade discussions, right? And hopes are really, really high at this point. So how will this impact the crude futures going forward?
Well, I think that the big story for oil is is more the OPEC cuts and less the trade. But trade is sentiment. The trade will give sentiment and will underline. And we saw today that Donald Trump came out just quite positive on Huawei, which one thought that there was a less belligerent stance. So one thinks we might get towards resolution.
So what else are you expecting when we talk about the OPEC's supply cuts for this year? Well, are you expecting further reduction in production?
It totally depends. I mean, OPEC has a compliance of 78%, the non-OPEC countries of 25%. So they have headroom. They can do quite a bit more. It really depends. Saudi Arabia and UAE have over-complied. I would expect if the price sort of hovers between 60 and 70, there's no need to do anything else. But if the price goes lower, they will need to do more.
That's exactly what Goldman Sachs, for example, also said earlier this week about the outlook for crude prices between 65 and 70 US dollars per barrel. Is this what you expect as well for this year?
Well, I'm much more cautious than the bank analysts on where I see the price going, because it can just, the smallest thing can make them go down again or go up again. But I would say when you look at it, where both the oil companies and the OPEC nations they want some stability in the price, and they see a bandwidth between 60 and 70, 75 as a really fair price.
Mm-hmm. Now, the International Energy Agency came out with their monthly report yesterday late at night, saying basically that global oil demand growth forecast is expected around 1.4 million barrels per dollar this year, per day, of course. What's your forecast?
Well, I think that the IEA has been consistent. The IEA has been consistent in saying it's $1.4 million. Now, there is where the trade dispute comes in, because if you have trade disputes, people will need to localize supply chains. They will have less access for the goods to international markets, and that obviously means you need less oil to ship things around. So in that sense, for the demand side, for the supply side less so, but for the demand side, these trade talks are really important. But what's also important is what's going to happen with the US and Europe in terms of cars.
Now, another top story in commodities today, of course, is Saudi Aramco's $10 billion deal with the Chinese conglomerate Norinco to develop a petrochemical facility in the city of Panjin. So where do you see this going? Because that is a major team up between two large oil producers as well.
It doesn't surprise me not in the slightest. When you look at where Saudi, where UAE have gone, where the GCC countries have gone to put their oil, it's for the last 10, 15 years, it's been a drive to the east. So it doesn't. Aramco has a huge refining investments in the US, so it makes absolute sense to replicate that in China as well. And what better time than when the Crown Prince is visiting the country?
Exactly. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is in Beijing still today. So do you expect that Saudi Arabia is actually turning its back to the US and all towards China now in its foreign policy as well?
Well, Saudi has always sort of the Saudi oil flow has gone in that direction for a long time. But in foreign policy terms, you know, after the Khashoggi affair, the West has become quite tough on outside of the US, have become quite tough on the Saudis, and they will, you know, they're pragmatic. They will find their friends where they can get them.
Now, of course, another burning issue is the equal pay day that we have here in Switzerland today. What kind of new legislation do you think should we, have here in Switzerland? Because other countries are far ahead of Switzerland.
Well, I think it would be good to have legislation. But you know what I really find is interesting when you look at how the whole environmental debate has evolved. How it's nowadays difficult for a bank to lend into a coal project, even into an oil project, because the mood music has become very, anti-CO2 emissions. We need that mood music to be as broad-based for equal pay, for support of women. You know, we need the Ms. Thunbergs of this world to go and strike for equal pay day.
So yes to legislation or not?
Yes to legislation, absolutely. I mean, we're not going to move the needle if we don't.
Why are we waiting for such a long time?
I don't know. You need to ask our parliamentarians. It's up to them. Why are we electing parliamentarians that don't do anything about it?
Maybe you should become a politician and push for this and push the envelope a little bit further.
I think we do need that legislative might, but we also need to bring it in sort of a PR effort. We need to bring it more to the forefront, that it is just no longer acceptable for companies not to pay people equal pay. Right now, if a company is bad to the environment, they can't find investors. We should do the same thing. We should do the same thing for investors should look the same way at equal pay.
A country like Iceland, for example, has adopted last year a law that forces and holds companies accountable for paying men and women equally. Do we need a similar law here?
It would be great, but I don't think we'll get it. We can wish for it, but I don't think we'll get it.
Because still at this point in time, we still have women, they earn 14.6% less than men.
Absolutely, and it's not acceptable. As I said, we need to change the public affairs, the mood music. The investors need to start. You know, laws are one thing, but once the investors look at it, companies behave.
And one final question on another burning topic, which is Brexit. A lot of resignations, a lot of trips to Brussels. What are you expecting for next week?
Well, I expect nothing. I don't think Mrs. May will get her plan through Parliament. What we've seen with Brexit is that the country is no longer divided along party lines, but along Brexit lines. When you ask people what they identify with, it's their Brexit stance much more than their party stance. And that's what the resignations are a reflection of. But it's very bad, because if we have a hard Brexit, I don't know how we manage the port of Dover, how we manage Eurotunnel, how we manage anything.